Welcome into the Summit. I'm your host, Nick Birnie. This is the second episode of our podcast series focusing on men and women's basketball for the Mohawk Mountaineers in the 2016-17 OCAA season. So welcome back inside. In the first episode of our series and podcast, we began by focusing on what has happened and taken place in the first few games of the year, thus being the first 6 games of action for the men and women's teams on the new season, and therefore we took a little bit of a look back at what has gone well and what has not worked as well through the first portion or quarter of the season. As we took a look at some of the results and most recent games of that time, we previewed exactly what was coming up in the weeks ahead, and therefore here in our second episode on the series, we're going to take a look back at a couple of games that we previewed in our last podcast and have now gotten the results from since then. To start, on the women's side, on Friday, November 25th, the girls found themselves on the road against Fanshawe College. Fanshawe, the Falcons, coming in not a tough opponent at 3-3, but someone that the Mountaineers would like to knock off. And of course, the ladies went out and put out a strong performance on the offensive end, and once again, a pretty stalwart defensive performance from one of the best defensive teams in the OCAA. They came out on top 79-63, winning their 6th straight game of the season, pushing themselves to 6-1 record. They were led again for the 5th time on the year in just 7 games now. Their leading scorer, Sam Pockernick, with a game-high 16 points to go along with 4 steals. Also chipping in well was Shannon O'Neill, 15 points, 3 boards and 3 assists. And Jasmina Kuchik, the super rookie, I should say, 14 points, 7 boards, and 3 assists on the night. Also notable performances from the Brown sisters. Karina Brown, 6 points and 8 boards, and Carissa Brown, her sister, 6 points and 5 boards. Monica Batnick also off the bench with 7 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. And Steph Rymack, a veteran leader, showed her presence, doing an all-around game of 9 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds to boot. So a very good performance on the road against Fanshawe. They win by 16 points. The defense almost as studious and solid as it has been up to this point in the year. And at the same time, the offense continuing a balanced scoring attack, which has involved more than one person being the leader. Of course, Sam Pockernick has been the mainstay scoring-wise and the leading scorer in, as mentioned at this point, after Friday's win, 5 of 7 games. However, the secondary scoring from Shannon O'Neill, Jasmina Kuchik on this night, and as we've seen Steph Rymack and Hunter Johns on a few other occasions, has been very important to keeping this team not only one of the top teams record-wise, but also one of their offenses in the top tier of the OCAA. Moving on from that victory on the road against Fanshawe Friday night, the Mountaineers made their way home for a Tuesday night matchup on November 29th, where they would be hosting their rivals, Redeemer College from Ancaster. Now, this is not quite a rivalry in a lot of people's opinions, nor should it be, considering the fact that Redeemer has not had a lot of success against Mohawk College in varsity sports in general, but especially considering men and women's basketball. Now, women's basketball, as we've been talking about here, 4 straight years, that's 8 games, twice a year, 4 straight years has Redeemer College failed to record a victory in women's basketball against the Mohawk Mountaineers. But on Tuesday night, a little history was made as Redeemer able to come out on top 72-68 in a heartbreaking thriller. Sam Pockernick was once again leading scorer for the Mohawk Mountaineers with 14 points and 3 steals. Hunter Johns, 5 points, 7 rebounds. Steph Rymack, 20 points and 5 rebounds. Shannon O'Neill, 13 points, 5 rebounds. And Jasmina Kuchik, 8 points, 16 boards. An extremely good performance off the bench, leading the Mountaineers in rebounding. But unfortunately, wasn't enough to get a win as Redeemer come out on top thanks to 2 highlight performances from their top 2 scorers. Jessica Brown, one of the top scorers in the OCAA, a top 5 points per game, over 20 points per game right now for Brown, ended up with 26 points. And matching her for the Redeemer Royals was Lindsay Moffitt, who also had 26 points and an extremely solid game with 5 made 3-pointers, something that Moffitt can do when she catches fire, as she is a 4th-year player, and we have seen in the past couple years for Redeemer. But finally, after 4 years of struggling, Redeemer in their first matchup with the Mountaineers in 2016-17, getting their first win, and on doing so on the road in a tough environment at the David Bray Athletic and Recreation Center. Now, going forward for the Mountaineers women's side, Humber College is their next opponent. Humber, of course, the same Humber College team that won the OCAA championship gold over these Mohawk Mountaineers in the final last season. So another look at Humber College, the first meeting this season since the finals, the first meeting also since Kevin Duffy was suspended in that finals matchup. So a lot going into it involving keeping your head level if you're the Mountaineers, more so than even putting together the kind of performance needed to shut down certain players on Humber College offensively. And we've seen a lot of Humber College's offense has gone through one of the mainstays in the OCAA, one of the top players in CJ Nofuente, who will be a key to keep an eye on for Humber College offensively. She has been the number one option, and also after coming off the OCAA Female Athlete of the Year award last season, CJ Nofuente has not slowed down in becoming an even better all-around player from the guard position for Humber. Not only is she one of the top points per game leaders in the OCAA, but she is by far and away the assist leader in the OCAA standings right now in all of women's basketball in the East and West Division combined. So 20.5 points per game, something that most players could only wish to obtain through the course of a year. And of course, when you add the fact that she is a 9.5 rebound per game player, that puts her as one of the tops in the league. And then, of course, as mentioned, a full 2.7 assists per game higher than the second place statistical leader in Vare from Fanshawe College at 5.3. Nofuente stands at 8 assists per game. No other player is higher than 5.3 assists per game. So she is almost averaging a triple-double across the board and will be the key for the Mountaineers to watch in this game going in. Another key for the Mountaineers as we head into the Humber College final matchup of the 2016 portion of the schedule, and coming off a tough final home game for this portion of the schedule and their loss to Redeemer, going up against Humber and as tough a team as they are, Mohawk will look to hopefully bounce back and continue the balanced scoring, but improve the defense. Fanshawe only got 63 points, but Fanshawe not a very tough offense to stop. And against Redeemer, they only gave up 72 points, but Redeemer, a very struggling offense, all based around Jessica Brown's success. And Brown had taken a lot of shots in order to get her points, had not been a very successful field goal shooter in terms of percentage, shooting at 33.1, a lowly percentage coming in, yet the Mountaineers struggled. So hopefully, going into their next matchup, the Mountaineers will look to have a bit more consistency defensively. Their full court press was not always a staple against Redeemer in their last match. Maybe Kevin Duffy will look to use that a little more and go towards what he feels most comfortable is pushing the other team to make quick decisions. The Mountaineers oftentimes do go to their bench and use a deep bench. They do not tire their players out, so a full court press might benefit them, especially against a Humber opponent that runs the ball through one player so much in CJ Nofuente that you know who will be the mainstay and the person that the offense will be built around. Maybe best to put some pressure on her early, try and force her hand and force the mistakes of the Humber College opponent. Those Humber Hawks can be tough, and the Mountaineers will need to play their game in order to win. If they fall into Humber's game and they let Nofuente start to dictate the pace on Wednesday night, it will be a long night for the Mountaineers. They currently stand at 6-2, the women, and they take their 4-week winter break before resuming action later on in January. So for the Mountaineers, they are going into the halfway point above 500, a winning record, one of the top teams in the West. Even if they are to lose a second consecutive game to Humber College on Wednesday night, they will still be one of the top 3 teams in the West Division going into the break. Kevin Duffy's got to be pretty pleased, and I think the ladies will be pretty satisfied with their performance going into the midway point of the year. And just to point out a couple things to keep an eye on as we go into that second half. Sam Pockernick, team leader as mentioned prior, 17.1 points per game, puts her 7th in the league right now. She also is tied for 9th in the OCAA in steals at 3 steals per game. So her game has been being aggressive, attacking the hoop, and also aggressive on the defensive end, active hands, active feet. Someone who's also been a very, very pleasant surprise, and mentioned before, the wonder rookie, Jasmina Kucic, 10.9 rebounds per game. 3rd in all of the OCAA. She is 1st in defensive rebounds per game at 7.6 of those coming on the defensive end, just 2.3 on the offensive end, but she is one of the most dominant rebounding big men in the game. She also averages a 9.1 points per game. It puts her right at the bottom of the top 50 scorers in the OCAA at exactly that 50th spot. But when you add in that she averages at least a block per game at 1.1, that puts her 5th in the OCAA. So she is top 5 in 3 different categories, and that is something else and something special, an added bonus that Kevin Duffy will greatly appreciate from one of his young star players. Now we flip over to the men's side, and as we flip to the men's side for the Mountaineers, they were in action like the women on Friday, November 25th at Fanshawe College against the Falcons, looking to continue what had been a hot turnaround for the Mountaineers. Going into that game against Fanshawe, 4 straight victories. Most recently, after beating the Sioux in back-to-back games, they had gone on the road. They had defeated St. Clair Saints 93-80 to improve to 3-2, a third straight win, and then won their 4th 93-87 the next day in the afternoon, squeaking out a victory over Lambton. Some big performances over that weekend pair of games was Kareem Collins' 20 points, 5 boards, and 3 assists against St. Clair, before he then picked up the first double-double of the season for any Mountaineer player in the victory over Lambton, scoring 14 points as 11 assists, leading to the double-double, and also adding 6 boards and 5 steals. And also big games in that one, Jared Peacock, 20 points, 4 rebounds, and Lamar Barr, 20 points, 4 steals, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists in the victory. However, on Friday night against Fanshawe, the Falcons brought with them a much better offensive performance than we were used to seeing from Fanshawe in the first 6 games of the season. The Falcons able to crack the century mark with a 192 victory over the Mountaineers, who struggled once again defensively. The offense was fine, but a lot of different things that Brian Jonker is going to need to twist and detail on the defensive end, and that also bled over to their loss to Redeemer 96-86 on Tuesday night, November 29th, from the David Braley Athletic and Recreation Center on Mohawk College campus, where we saw, again, for a third straight game, Matt Elcock struggle, pouring in just 5 points and 2 rebounds, his most, disappointing effort of the season. Meanwhile, Lamar Barr poured in 19 points with 3 boards and 3 assists, had a pretty solid all-around game, and did a terrific job for the most part covering Rayvon Higdon, the top scorer in the OCAA, let alone for the Redeemer Royals, averaging well above 20 points per game on the season. Rayvon Higdon was held down for most of the game at 14 points through 3 quarters before exploding for 16 in the final stanza, putting himself at the 30-point mark as the top scorer on the night. Kareem Collins also had 12 points and 3 rebounds. And Ty Uhrig, 4 points, 12 boards, and 4 blocks on the night. Had a pretty solid game, but unfortunately for the Mountaineers, it was clearly not enough. Higdon now averaging 27.8 with the updated stats. Clearly a little bit too much down the clutch part of the game in the fourth quarter when his team needed him most. He was able to perform and deliver, and the Mohawk Mountaineers slowly watched their lead slip away. And as their lead started to slip away, the team slowly started to fall apart on the court, and the offense became less communicative. And the game started to slide farther and farther away, and the scoreline of 10 points really doesn't show you how close it was in those final 3 minutes. So there are things to build on there, but the way that the final minutes ticked away disappointingly with turnovers on offense and miscues on defense and open buckets in the lane for Higdon, there's a few things there, as I just pointed out, that Jonker would definitely not want to see happen again, especially in such a tight game when you need your players to be on and to be at their best in both areas of the court. He didn't get anything on either end from the 5 men on the court, it felt like, and he had his best guys out there. It just didn't pan out. So occasionally you're going to have those nights as well, but a few tweaks needed here and there for the Mountaineers as they move into their next action against Humber College, who, as we know, on the men's side as well as the women's side, very dominant, the Hawks. They will bring with them one of the better offenses in the league. Humber coming in, of course, have played 8 games like the Mountaineers and are 6-2, so they find themselves in 3rd place in the division going into this matchup. And for Mohawk, it'll be a big handle to deal with the all-around scoring and balanced scoring of the Hawks. That has been their biggest key over the past few years. A couple guys to keep an eye on would be Tyrone Dixon and Ansel Martin, who are the top 2 fifth-year scorers, 14.5 points per game and 14.4 respectively. And, of course, CJ Bennett, the second-year forward, 11.6 points per game, has looked very good, 81.5 from the free throw line, second best on the team. And defensively, you got to watch Gibson Edifool, who the 5th-year point guard, 5 assists per game to go along with 7.1 points per game. He also averages 2.3 steals per game to lead the team. And Tyrone Dickinson, of course, has been big down low, averaging a double-double at this point in the season to go along with his 14.5 points, 10.6 boards per game. So the Hawks have good down low play. I don't think you would say that they have weak guard play, but their guard play, aside from Edifool, has not shown up as the most dominant or defensively stout. So there is a way that the Mountaineers can win this game by using their outside play, by bettering them with Elcock, Barr, and Collins. But again, it depends how they show up, and Matt Elcock has struggled in the last few games, so hopefully he will have a pick-me-up game prior to hitting a 4-week layoff. Currently, they are at 500 at 4-4 with one game remaining before the end of the first half of the season. This has been the second episode of the Summit Podcast, detailing the 2016-17 Mohawk Mountaineers season. I'm your host, Nick Birnie. Thank you for listening and watching on YouTube, and you can catch up with us more on my Twitter, Nick_Birnie. Also, check me out on Facebook at NICK. BIRNIE is the last name, Nick Birnie again. Or on YouTube under, of course, as you heard it, NICK BIRNIE, Nick Birnie. Thanks for listening, everyone.